Hi, I'm Johnny from Akashic, and I'm very happy today to be speaking with Kwame Dawes, one of our truly great living poets. His latest book is the best-selling novel, The Mountain and the Sea. How are you doing today, Kwame, and where are you speaking from?
I'm doing well, Johnny. I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska. That's where I've been locked in for the last few months. Yeah.
As a prolific writer, how do you keep your imagination from stagnating?
That's an interesting question because I don't know if I do anything to sort of to ward off the stagnation of imagination because I've never felt it threatened. I suppose I've what I fear could happen, it hasn't happened yet, is that I would just lose interest in the world. Um, and that's a real danger because, the world can become tedious. The imagination is a solace, it's a kind of refuge, it's a place where one exercises some of the most positive of human processes, namely the capacity to empathize, to feel with, to transport oneself into another world, into another person's experience, to imagine the future and to think about what the future might be like. So for me, the imagination is as important to me as a function of my living as eating and breathing. So I've never felt it threatened.
So you were born in Ghana, and you have lived in Jamaica, South Carolina, Nebraska, and perhaps a few other places as well. Is your imagination stimulated or conversely dampened by where you are living at any given time?
No, the short answer to that is no. I think my confidence about writing about new places, in the same way that my confidence about writing about new experiences and people can be challenged, and it's solved by by learning more, by paying attention to my ignorance and sort of offsetting my ignorance by study and by listening, learning the language for the trees and the animals, learning the geography of a space, learning the language that people speak in that space, and then learning who I am in that space. So for me, movement gives me great opportunity. And I have the added benefit of being able to compare where I am to where I've been, and then with where I might be.
Do you suppose that a mark of a good writer is someone who's aware when their confidence is being challenged?
Yeah, I believe the best writers are those that are constantly aware of their limitations as writers. I think the very act of writing, and certainly as a poet, language inadequacy is one of the most humbling, frustrating, and yet empowering parts of that process, because I think we work harder to capture moments through language, which is in itself limited. The reason why I think many writers envy musicians is that a single passage of music can capture so much emotion and thought and so on and so forth without a word being used, and we think, well, how do I do that? How do I manage to replicate that kind of feeling, that kind of thought through language?
What has the political climate been like in Lincoln, Nebraska since the murder of George Floyd? And have there been public protests?
Yeah, there have been several protests in Lincoln and in Omaha, which is just about 90 minutes from here. There have been arrests. There have been tremendous efforts to challenge the challenge, question to the systems that have existed, even here in Nebraska, a Midwestern state with a relatively small population, a massive state physically, about 3.5 million people living here. But there's a history of Black presence here. There's a history of the dynamic relationship between the police and Black people. And so I've been as much involved in work here, whether it's at my university, whether it's in the community, in trying to assist organizations to examine themselves and to see how they can wrest from from themselves that the history of systemic racism, and to try and replace it with something more, something that is that ameliorates those problems. There is a lot for Nebraskans to push through, especially white Nebraskans, because I think there's a perception of sort of separation from these issues, because it's a state that is predominantly white, and there's a way in which there's a feeling that, well, we don't have that history, but it's a misconception. It's not true. I mean, it doesn't take much to remember that Malcolm X's father was from Omaha. He was lynched essentially in Omaha. He was murdered in Omaha for his political views. Omaha has a long history of racism. I put it this way, Johnny. I think what has happened is that those places where people have already been doing a tremendous amount of work, whether those proposals, those suggestions, those pleas have been shelved, tend to be the ones that are moving quickly into action because they exist, that people have done that work. And I think it should be encouraging to many of who have been in the trenches for so long and feeling as if nothing has happened, that work was done, because very often many of these new proposals that seem to be changing our world somewhat are really old proposals that are being dusted off and just now finally being applied. And so we should always take some solace in that fact, that even if you're in a place where currently it seems as if there's no traction, I think the work continues to be needed.